Welcome to our daily hovers. I'm Meek Nomicon, and today we're playing through the game Photopsia, the girl that saw stars. We play as a girl called Iris, who's been suspended from school for a week, and unfortunately, misfortune seems to be following her. Had the girl known what the events that would follow her suspension would lead to, she might have tried never to let things get that far. However, deep down, she should have known that they would be nothing short of a blessing. Perhaps morality was just not something a 14-year-old teenager would much care for, or perhaps the fact that she had been met with various misfortunes along these years had dulled it. For the girl, daily life was miserable and mundane. It was like a disgusting, swampy cocktail that consisted of a routine as dull as lead, mixed with a dash of animosity from her human peers. It had only been a matter of time before the girl's mind became clouded by a thick, dense fog. An apathetic kind of nihilism that made everything feel pointless. To a certain extent, that had always been a part of her, but ended up significantly thickening during the past 2 years. Today, however, the girl had a reason to be proud of herself. The monotonous routine had been broken, and she wouldn't have to return to her peers anytime soon. Though she couldn't express it properly, and there wasn't anyone to convey it to, she was giddy as could be. As the girl turned the key to her house and opened the front door, the familiar dim and cramped hallway greeted her. No one was home. It's not as if she'd expected anyone to be, but it still was a slight blow to the girl's mood. It was quite typical for no one to be home. As usual, the girl's father was absent. His trips tended to leave him out of the picture for at least a week. He was a truck driver that transported goods through various European nations. It wasn't something to brag about, but it was enough to support both of them. In the current situation, his absence could be considered a blessing. There would be no angry yelling, or at least not face to face. It was a detestable situation that left no one happy, but supposedly it was a parent's duty to scold their child whenever they did something socially unacceptable. The girl steps inside, swinging the door shut behind her. Oh, we look pretty rough. So I'm guessing we got suspended for fighting, huh? That eye looks painful. As she flipped the light switch to her right and wiped her shoes on the doormat, she murmured, "I'm home." Crouching down to slip off her shoes, she pulled open the worn-out, askew shoe rack and exchanged them for a pair of simple home slippers. Ouch! What did we do? Did we go tumbling through the barbed wire or something? Still bending over, her eyes lingered on her lower legs, investigating the shallow cuts that dotted them. Most already had proper scabs. Several streaks of blood had flown down and stained her socks. It wasn't a lot of blood, but the wounds had still bled more than expected. As the girl stared, she bit her lip in discomfort. The usual lights had begun to dance in front of her eyes. The girl wasn't used to getting injuries that made her bleed. That's concerning. So, what, you're more used to bruises? I feel like this might be an issue. Hours earlier, the girl had gotten into a physical fight at school. The brawl had, unsurprisingly, concluded with her getting knocked out into the bushes growing in the school's courtyard, which ended up having surprisingly sharp thorns. Okay, so my prediction wasn't far off with the barbed wire then. Maybe it had been a mistake to attack the classmate with a beefcake of a boyfriend, but on an emotional level, it seemed to have been satisfying at least. Of course, the rowdy chihuahua-like girl had acted like she was a pure, innocent victim, and thus she and her older, serial repeater bodyguard had gotten off scot-free. The girl lightly touched her bruised eye. Now and again it would visibly throb, gradually worsening the swelling. Yeah, that looks kind of worse than I remember it being. She sighed and carefully placed her backpack on the floor. It was sturdy, despite being second-hand, and so it luckily hadn't really gotten scratched up during her tumble into the bushes. With a dismayed look, the girl blinked a few times, trying to get the stars to leave her vision. They danced endlessly, almost in a taunting manner. Shutting her eyes, the girl took a few deep breaths. Doing so for about a minute usually helped her with getting them out of her sight. Naturally, it worked this time as well. As the girl got up, slipping her feet into the slippers, she took a keyring from her coat pocket and locked the front door with the thickest of the keys. Along with the key to her bicycle's lock, a metallic four-leaf clover dangled from the ring. The middle of it was engraved with the girl's name. Returning the keyring to its usual pocket, Iris tiredly let her coat slip from her shoulders, hanging it on one of the 3 lonely hooks to her left, at the right side of the door. Picking up her bag again, Iris switched off the entry hall's light and proceeded into the living room. The living room had 3 functions. It was a kitchen, a dining room, and as the name implies, a living room. Though now that her father was gone, she wouldn't be using the dining area. The dining table was more of a formality. Iris herself preferred to eat on the couch while watching television. There were 4 other rooms in the house, 2 small bedrooms, a bathroom, and a small utility closet with a washing machine, a dryer, and other cleaning tools. Overall, the room was a little cramped, but the girl was at ease with that. She was used to small spaces. It was the big, open ones that instilled discomfort in her. The furniture was overall pretty dull. The house had come with it, as had all the homes which the girl and her father had resided in throughout Iris's life. The only piece of furniture that hadn't come with the house was a small freezer, for her father always seemed worried about running out of food. It was stocked up with cheap frozen pizzas, cheap ice cream, and meat. Delightful, the trifecta of food. That's all you need in life. Pizza, ice cream, and all of the meats. Actually, and noodles. Noodles are good. They never took any of the furniture with them, as everything was always of a mediocre quality and did its job as adequately as it possibly could without ever being too good. Years ago, in another town, the girl noticed how much more comfortable her friend's house was. It had been quite a shock, especially when the friend had insisted that it wasn't anything that great. Sometimes the girl pondered whether she and her father would have nice furniture if her mum had been alive. Typically, the 2 of them would have left this place a year ago, but yet they remained stuck in this place. The 2 had rarely ever lingered anywhere for longer than a year, and unfortunately for Iris, they were currently stuck in this place. Lost in thoughts, Iris absent-mindedly entered her own bedroom and dropped her backpack off her shoulders next to the dresser. The room was impersonal, save for the things on top of the dresser and the star-themed bedsheets which she had gotten for her birthday a few years prior. Hey! Ghost stories, or ghost sightings, is that? Delightful. That's the only book I want to read. On top of the dresser, there were books, small gemstones, and a glass of water. The books were mainly ones that Iris needed for school. However, there was a scrapbook and a library book about ghost sightings amongst them as well. Nothing intrigued the girl like a good scary story. Really? Have you tried scary stories to tell in the dark? I recommend it. Wait, it's actually a book. I think it's based on a book, right? I know it's definitely a movie. Iris tried to be skeptical about the described sightings, but after seeing some of the photos and reading some passages from the book, it was something that was easier said than done. She couldn't help but feel somewhat paranoid whenever a particularly scary passage or image randomly popped in her mind. Iris really wanted to keep it, but the book would need to be returned to the library next week. Generally, the girl liked pretty and unusual things, and thus, over time, she had collected gems, namely a tiger's eye, a blue sunstone, and an amethyst. but those were her primary focus around the time she first discovered gemstones. Later in her gem phase, she had taken a liking to iridescent gems such as labradorite, opal, and fluorite. Even if spending money on them meant she couldn't buy other things, Iris would rather spend her money on the colourful stones than on new, second-hand clothing, even if it got her into trouble with her peers. Besides, at this point in time, the hatred between her and her classmates was unfixable. Even if she somehow began wearing the newest of the new, it's not as if it would magically fix her social life. Before she had started collecting gemstones, Iris had also been collecting pretty-looking pebbles. Whenever she saw one in someone's garden, she would take it. No one would miss them, and she found it a waste to have such pretty stone and be left unacknowledged. To this very day, Iris still carried the prettiest of pebbles in her backpack at all times, to look at them more closely during the school breaks whenever she felt down. Taking pebbles to school was a lot less risky than taking any of her gemstones with her. After all, no one would go out of their way to steal a pebble. She hoped. Iris crouched down next to her bag, took out her phone and her charger, plugging the said charger into the socket next to her bed once she had connected the phone. It wasn't very low on batteries, but she preferred to keep it fully charged as it was less likely to unexpectedly shut down that way, as even with the new battery, it was still a bit unstable. The phone's design was a rip-off of one of the more popular brands. It was 4 generations old, and it was a second-hand one as well. To her father's anger, it had come with a crack on the screen that hadn't been in the seller's image. This phone had been the girl's birthday present this year, and even though the quality wasn't as high as that of her classmates, and it wasn't good enough to play games bigger than 2 megabytes on, it had overjoyed her to finally get a phone that she could use to surf the net and watch online videos with. It was only natural for Iris to have a phone on her, with her father being out so much. Her previous one had been a very old Nokia one. Oh, I wonder what kind of phone that was. Was that a brick by any chance? An indestructible model. She had kept it just in case the new one would break down, or for when someone would destroy it on purpose. Iris plopped down onto her bed of stars, and as she did, she saw the dancing lights again. She sighed, but stared at them for a while. The fight had tired her. Even though it hadn't lasted longer than a few minutes, it was more than she could handle. Due to the stars that would pop up whenever she exercised or got dizzy, her father had told her that she wasn't allowed to do sports. At school, she was only allowed to participate with the warm-ups during PE class. Though he had arranged it to protect her, it had backfired and become just another excuse for her classmates to single her out and bully her. Iris frowned and swatted at one of the stars before closing her eyes again. It was almost as if she had felt something when hitting it, but her father had told her not to focus on them too much as it could permanently damage her eyes. The girl was skeptical to believe that actually was how it worked, but did as she was told anyway, just in case. Iris sat up slowly and opened her eyes again while simultaneously taking out her nightgown from under her pillow. Even though the routine had been drastically disrupted, it seemed that it hadn't changed the girl's daily course of action all that much. After having showered, Iris bandaged up the cuts on her leg, put on her nightgown and threw the clothes she had worn into the washing machine. Usually, she would shower right before going to bed and wash her clothes in the weekend, but she had bled a bit on them and didn't like wearing filthy clothes. The girl's sweater was her only warm piece of clothing, and her skirt was the only one that still fit her. Okay, I know you said you didn't want to get new clothes because it's not going to fix your relationship with your peers. But the sounds of it though, you just need the new clothes. I'm sorry, don't buy the gemstones, buy the clothes. Her father did not have the money, nor the time to go get her anything else. He always insisted on joining her to select clothing that didn't stand out too much, but his taste was so old-fashioned that Iris, despite his efforts, ended up sticking out like a sore thumb. Okay, but if we're old enough to be living alone while our father's gone for a week, surely we're old enough to go get our own clothes. And we must have some money of our own. I mean, how else did we buy the gemstones? Whenever she would confront him with it, he would get angry and start yelling at her, and thus, Iris feared to bring it up again. I'm concerned about this, Dad, now. Clothes shopping was always something that was procrastinated. It was not as if her father had actually promised her to do it, so she had no reason to expect him to ever come along. And so, there was no reason to expect getting any new clothes either. She had to take care of the ones she had. Yes, but the ones you have don't fit. This is not a good situation for Iris to be in. As the washing machine filled up with water, the girl left the utility closet. She hadn't eaten anything since lunchtime. The kitchen didn't quite have a proper counter. It had been replaced with a small freezer. Thus, Iris and her father would just use the dining table to prepare food. Tonight's dinner would most likely be pasta, arugula, and steak. The girl's cooking skills were above average when compared to that of her peers, as to be expected of someone who was home alone so often. Her pepper to salt ratio seemed to be close to perfection, and she had a great fondness for garlic. The girl got out a knife and ripped off a clove from the garlic stored in the fridge. As she cut it to pieces, she wore a satisfied smile. The soft sound of the knife tapping against the cutting board was mild and pleasant. Even once the clove was divided into dozens of smaller pieces, Iris kept cutting them up into smaller pieces. Every steak she prepared, she made with garlic. She even smeared garlic butter on top of it. Not only that, any sandwich that wasn't sweet would have the same buttery spread. Oh, you really love the garlic. Well, I suppose you're keeping all the vampires away. Just please tell me you're constantly brushing your teeth. She'd also smear it onto her steaming hot pizzas, right as they were fresh out the oven. Her cooking was limited to whatever her father could afford, but once in a while, he would buy some spices for Iris to experiment with. This time, it was rosemary, the dew of the sea. Cutting up things was Iris's favourite part of cooking. Along with creating sauces, it felt a bit like she was making a magic potion. After a while, the pasta was boiling and the juicy steak was sizzling in garlic-filled olive oil. Eventually, the meal was on her plate, with the predictable addition of arugula as the girl sat on the couch, watching the news, watching the usual reporter. Whenever her father was home, they would usually joke about the awfully coordinated and expensive clothing everyone was wearing. A food scandal! Recent reports from the health inspection state that significant quantities of horse meat have been found in several meat products sold at fast food chains and supermarkets. This meat originates from a foreign company. When reaching out to the supplier of the meat about the matter, they had no comment. Okay, I know this was actually a real scandal, but am I one of the only ones that don't particularly care? I know the thought of eating horse meat is pretty bad, but you gotta admit, if you'd done it, you didn't taste the difference. Just saying, if you can't actually identify it, at the end of the day, it's just meat. Iris rolled her eyes. Figures? Why are they even expecting them to respond? Of course they wouldn't. What's to guarantee this isn't horse? Just saying, did you kill the cow yourself? The girl stared at her own steak, squinting a bit. Was it horse meat? See, this game gets me. It could be horse meat. and we are likely going to eat it regardless because we know this steak, regardless of what meat it is, tastes good. She examined it for a bit longer before shrugging and sticking the piece into her mouth. Good on ya, Iris. When reaching out to supermarkets and fast food chains that did business with the horse meat supplier, all of them stated that they would cut ties with the company. In other news, even more people have gone missing this week. In the majority of the reported cases, the missing person has last been seen traveling by train. Rumors of a serial killer are on the rise. However, the local police forces that investigated the disappearances were quick to dismiss them. We don't want to rush to any conclusions. That's not enough evidence to conclude that even is a serial killer involved. The common denominator of these people is that they're loners with a history of mental health problems. There is no evidence suggesting that any of them had been adopted, harmed, or even followed around, for that matter. Our officers are working hard to locate the potential victims, but so far we don't have any solid leads. If you have any information that could aid the police in their investigation, please call the number currently on the screen or contact the police force through social media. Now on to the weather after our break. Iris groaned. The commercials were always up to 7 to 8 minutes on this channel. They would often repeat the same garbage commercials over and over again. This program was brought to you by Minty Fresh Toothpaste. 2 treatments with Minties a day will keep the cavities away. Are you tired of having bowel troubles? Fund our research on synthetic organs. Fund now and receive special privileges once our research is finalized. Iris zapped away. Her father didn't really care about watching commercials, but she didn't want to waste her time with them. Eventually, she found a channel with a baking competition that looked interesting. She probably would not really get the means to make the same recipes herself, but that didn't diminish the joy of watching them. The contestants had to make apple pies of their preference. 2 people would be kicked out at the end of the episode. The girl eagerly stared at the creation of apple pies, from her nation's typical crumble apple pies to lattice pies to apple galettes. They all looked mouth-watering to her. I didn't realize there was that many kinds of apple pie. I thought apple pie was just apple pie. I'm not a fan of apple pie. I don't like fruits in my desserts. As the girl passively finished her food, she left the TV on in the background. Iris hastily collected everything dirty and put it in the sink. She spread out a dishcloth onto the freezer and began washing the dishes. Of course, she wanted to see what was going on in the cooking program, but what she wanted even more was to go to bed. Sleep was already in her eyes. She had trouble keeping them open. Naturally, the bruise didn't help either. The TV was hard to hear in the background noise of the sink, and off the dishes that Iris scrubbed them clean in the bubbly water. Once she finished cleaning the knives, she washed a bit more absent-mindedly, her eyes closing for a few seconds as her hands kept working. Gradually, she spaced out more and more, making the process a lot slower. Once she was done, the cooking show had already ended and the commercials had started playing. Iris sighed and carefully dried off the cutlery, returning them to their respective locations, and then spaced out once more. Again, she saw lights dancing in her eyes, but she was too drowsy to care. Even the washing machine cycles were done by now, so she made haste to the laundry room. Without bothering to turn on the lights in the laundry room, she robotically took her clothes out of the washing machine, shut it down, and threw the clothes into the dryer as she shut the door behind her. On a typical day, Iris would always drink a cup of tea before bed, but today, she wouldn't even get to drink her tea before falling asleep. However, today, Iris just turned off the television and the living room lights as she returned to her own room. The girl tiredly walked over to her bed and plopped into it. Once she had properly gotten herself under the blankets, she almost immediately drifted off. The pleasant scent of bergamot was the first thing I noticed upon waking up. I was sat at a small yet elegant table, a teapot, 2 teacups, and a refined cake stand. Without really thinking about it, I took the cup of tea into my hand. It felt light and was unfilled. How peculiar! I was so sure that it had been filled when I picked it up. Frowning, I looked down at it, and as I did, the cup gained weight and filled up with hot tea. It was a bit surprising, but luckily, I didn't drop it. My eyes fell on the chair across from mine. It was empty, yet the teacup on the other side contained hot tea. Was I waiting for someone? Was this some kind of meeting? It had to be. Somehow, I just knew it. I fixed my posture, straightening my back. Who was I meeting? I couldn't remember, but for some reason, I was so sure someone would come around and tell me something important. What's wrong, dear? You look confused. Huh? I looked over the other seat, but didn't see anyone in it. It couldn't be that I was meeting someone who was invisible, right? Down here, girl. Come on, you didn't forget about me, right? My eyes shifted downwards. Wait, was it coming from the teapot? Now and then, steam would come out of the teapot spout. It was almost rhythmical, as if it was breathing. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I didn't want to offend the teapot. Of course I didn't. I tried to say it with conviction, but it was clear that I was lying. Oh dear, you did, didn't you? A wave of shame flooded me. I bit my lip and looked away. I couldn't face the teapot. To have a meeting and not even know the person who was serving our snacks and tea was utterly disrespectful. A real reputation ruiner. Now, don't fret, my dear. It's fine, really. Honestly, I shouldn't have expected you to know. Feel free to call me Miss Teapot. Miss Teapot? Isn't that kind of stupid? Is what I wanted to say, but I held my tongue. I didn't want to offend the lady any more than I already had, even though she had told me it was okay. It really wasn't. At least, not in my opinion. It's nice to meet you. I'm Iris. I know that. It's nice to see you again, Iris. I'm very sorry, but I don't remember our former meeting. Or meetings. That's fine. Nothing particularly interesting happened, so it's only natural for you to forget. But still, enough, girl. I have only so much patience for endless, unproductive apologies. Just say thank you and be done with it. The sudden sharp tone threw me off. It was very frank. Usually, people didn't respond like that. But then again, Miss Teapot wasn't exactly a person. Thank you. There, isn't that much better? Now we can have a productive conversation. Right. Okay, so what should I ask Miss Teapot about? I could ask about Miss Teapot, where we are, or ask the person I'm supposed to meet. I mean, there's a second cup, so let's ask what the person we're supposed to meet. Who am I meeting? I mean, I assume that teacup isn't for you, since you can't drink from it or sit on that chair. Without it being impractical, at least. Well, you're meeting someone important.
That doesn't tell me anything.
It is all you need to know.
Do you at least know if they're human or another teapot?
No.
Did I meet them before?
Maybe.
Fine. Can you tell me anything about them?
Why should I tell you? This conversation isn't going anywhere. Okay then, ask about Miss Teapot. Let's see if we can get friends.
You're a teapot.
I'm aware.
Do you like being a teapot?
Do you like being a human? I hadn't really thought about it. I guess it was an odd question.
Not in particular, I guess.
Wow, there's your answer then.
I see.
What else could I ask? If I had asked her if she likes the way she looks, she'd probably ask me if I like how I look, or something similar.
Do you have any hobbies?
Do I look like I have hobbies? Look, Miss Teapot, cut the sass. I'm trying to be friendly. Just because I'm not very good at it doesn't mean I need you pointing out how silly my comments are.
So, I guess the answer is no?
This is kind of awkward. What? Okay, so Miss Teapot doesn't want to talk about herself. She doesn't want to talk about who we're meeting. Okay then, Miss Teapot, explain to me. Where are we?
So, where are we?
The teapot chuckled. Smaller puffs of steam escaped the sprout. Does that really matter? I thought for a while. Did it matter? I looked around. Only then did I notice the table was surrounded by a dark, dense fog. The table wasn't smothered in it due to some kind of peculiar spotlight that hung above it. A sense of dread washed over me. How hadn't I noticed the surroundings until now? The fog moved, squished and squirmed in an unnatural manner. In the distance, I heard a disgusting wet sound. Somehow, I felt like calling out to the elephant in the room would kill the light above and let the mist invade the area the tea table was in. What if it would hurt me? No, something like that would definitely hurt me if I could get to me, I'm sure. Anxiously, I bit my lip and I turned my attention back to the teapot and decided to drop the subject.
I guess not. Not really.
I couldn't help but wonder whether the teapot felt the same as me about the dark fog. Even if she did, she probably wouldn't tell me. The dread that had filled me just a few moments earlier made way for irritation. The teapot had no useful information whatsoever. It was all just vague nonsense. Why couldn't she just tell me? Could it be that she was putting up a high and mighty act because I have amnesia?
Do you just not know things yourself? Your cryptic answers are useless. You should just tell me if you don't know something.
Such impudence! Child, perhaps you should remain more prudent, for your own good.
What are you going to do about my impudence? You're just a teapot. Why don't you tell me instead of just acting as if you're so smart and better than me?
You were far less obnoxious when you were more meek. It's no wonder you don't have any friends. Ouch! That one stung. I didn't really have a retort to that since, well, it was true. As I averted my eyes, they fell onto the snack tray. It was not filled with regular snacks and cakes, but with small floating stars. Curiously, I picked up one of the shiny snacks. It felt oddly warm and left a tingly sensation on my fingers. Having nothing to lose, I popped the star into my mouth. I'm not entirely sure that was a good thing to be doing. As I did, the same tingling filled the inside of my mouth. The star seemed to have somewhat of a sugary sweet shell, But as I bit into it, a thick, cold substance like liquid came out, filling up my whole mouth with something with a condensed milk-like flavour. As I savoured it, it changed into something hot, more akin to cherry. It was a bit like ice cream with hot cherries on top, yet it was unlike anything I had tasted before. I couldn't help letting out a satisfied sigh. It was absolutely perfect. Miss Teapot let out a somewhat condescending giggle. Every time you act like it's the first time you've tasted one, even though you stuff your mouth with them each and every time.
Huh? Really? This taste is so different. I can't even imagine forgetting anything this tasty.
But you did forget, didn't you? I'm fairly sure some people would kill for your talent at forgetting things.
Hey, it's not that bad. It's not like I forgot everything. It's just that I'm having a hard time thinking in this place.
And that doesn't apply to other places?
Of course not. Just apparently here and mazes.
Mazes are my downfall. Then, what other places do you remember? I closed my eyes for a brief moment, trying to think about it, but no matter how deep I dug into my mind, nothing came up. No images, no thoughts, nothing. I couldn't recall anything outside of this space. Why not? That didn't make any sense. I'm sure I hadn't just existed inside this space all this time.
I don't really remember anything else.
Then it really is a talent, is it not? Don't just blurt out nonsense without thinking about it. It's becoming of a lady.
I'm not a lady. I'm a girl.
Young lady then.
Whatever. I don't care anymore. Just stop antagonizing me already. I didn't do anything wrong, yet you're treating me as if this amnesia is somehow my fault. Why don't you work on trying to help me instead of just looking for excuses to act condescending and mean?
Well, you can't really blame me for being a hothead, can you? I was born in heat and born to be very hothead. I am today. Letting out a frustrated huff, I took my teacup and brought it to my lips. The bergamot scent was typical for Earl Grey, but I could detect another aroma too. It was something citrus-like. To be exact, it smelled like orange. So then, this was Lady Grey, not Earl Grey. I had no idea why I knew something so insignificant, yet remembered almost nothing else, but at least it was something. As I took a sip of the tea, I couldn't help but notice that it was somewhat bland. It was as if the tea leaves had been used a second time and were close to being exhausted. We seem to know a lot about tea, huh? Wondering about the mixture and slightly curious whether it had typical blue cornflower petals that was supposed to be amongst them, I raised the lid of the teapot and peeked into it. Hey! I won't stand for this! Don't you just do as you please with my body, you insolent child!
Jeez, don't make it sound so dirty.
There were no leaves inside at all. In fact, there was not even tea inside, just hot water. For some reason, I couldn't help but feel small.
Why is there no tea inside at all? Oh my, even though you're a teapot, all you have inside is some flavoured hot water. What is the point in that? Is this due to your own incompetence? Even my own teapot is somewhat bland. Is this all that you can do?
Watch your tongue, girl, or else I will make sure you'll burn it on your next cup. Besides, this is your responsibility, not mine.
Huh? What do you mean?
While I may provide the water and will always keep it hot, it is your task to find the tea leaves.
What? How am I supposed to find them in a place like this?
How should I know? You usually just disappear into the shadows for a while, and then you come back with tea.
Really? I go out? Into that darkness?
That is correct. I stared into my teacup for a while, and at the cup meant for the person, or thing, I was waiting for. It seemed to be cooling off. I couldn't deny that it would be inappropriate not to serve hot tea to someone I was meeting, especially not when I had drunk some before they had arrived. Maybe they would come with tea themselves? That's something that I could hope for, but it wasn't a certainty. As I peered into the darkness mist, I felt nothing but trepidation, as if going out in it would destroy me. Whether it was the poison or some inexplicable dark being, it felt like something hostile. I didn't want to go out into it. The mere idea sent shivers down my spine. To calm my nerves, I shoved a few stars into my mouth. This time, I let the outer shells melt, and the patience was rewarded. The taste was even smoother than before. I hummed, satisfied as I finished my tea. Hesitantly, I peered over at the tea meant for the one I was supposed to meet. Are you considered drinking it?
Maybe.
It's a yes or no question, so it is safe to presume that is a yes then.
I guess so. I mean, otherwise the tea will go cold, right?
It'd be a waste. That's true, but maybe your company would like their tea cold.
Maybe. That's not something that is safe to assume.
That is true as well. So, will you drink it? I thought for a while. Drinking someone else's tea is rude. But if it meant the guest would get a new fresh tea, it wasn't all that bad, was it?
Depends on whether I'll be going out as that fog or not.
So will you?
Will I really find tea out there?
Well, you did come back with fresh leaves last time.
But I can't guarantee it.
Then it is safe, right?
I won't die?
The teapot barked out to laugh. Silly girl, do you think I can predict the future? Even if I claimed I could, why do you think my words would guarantee your safety? Fortune tellers often assure the safety of a person that pays them. But someone who dies after being told they'd live never lives to tell the tale of how that was a lie. How assuring is that?
So what you're saying is that you don't know?
No, what I'm saying is that I will say that you'll survive if it makes you leave. You're an awful conversational partner. You are hardly any better, teapot. Don't worry, dearie. You'll survive for sure.
As if anyone would believe that after your little rant. Besides, you're the one that's the awful conversational partner, not me.
Sighing, I tried to calm myself down. The issue was whether or not the tea was worth it. I pondered about it for a while. Going out into that darkness felt as if it would be a death sentence. But if Miss Teapot insisted on the fact that I had returned from it before, it might not be as lethal as it appeared to be. You know, okay, what should I do? How about this time? Nope, we're gonna just not take any risks and stay. There we go. Want to see what this is gonna do. I couldn't go out into that unholy darkness. No way. No way in hell. I'd never tread in such a dodgy looking area. Miss Teapot must have sensed the fear in my eyes and puffed out a mass of steam, mocking me, so I blurted out the first excuse that came to my mind.
I heard that in China, it's a popular trend to just drink hot water without leaves or anything. Maybe my guest has similar tastes?
You're quite the coward, aren't you? I feel like the term chicken isn't appropriate for this situation.
It It's easy for you to talk. You can't even walk.
That's not even an insult, silly girl. You have legs, yet you don't use them. I mean, I can use them to kick you if you would like. Is that a good use of my legs, Teapot? Meanwhile, you try to shame me for having none. What's even the point of having legs when you're too lazy to use them? It's not like I just bought these legs. I was born with them. And just like that, it's not like I didn't want legs. I was just born without them. How about that, girl? Would you have gone if you had legs? Miss Teapot remained silent. The steam kept coming out of her spout, but it was more regular and looked a lot less like breathing now. Eager for an answer, I asked again. What would you have done, Miss Teapot? Are you all right? Yet the teapot remained quiet. After waiting for a bit longer, I couldn't help but feel silly. What if this whole conversation had just been my imagination? Was I going crazy? I bit my lip. Did I kill her by not getting tea? But the steam should indicate that she was still okay, right? Just as I thought that, the steam stopped. I didn't feel anything. I was too confused to even think something emotional like good riddance or, oh no, this can't be. After staring at the teapot for what felt like minutes, I felt myself getting drowsy. I didn't fight it. There was really no point to just sitting here by myself. Maybe Miss Teapot had fallen asleep too. I shut my eyes, leaned back against the chair, and allowed sleep to take over. As I relaxed, I heard a distant dripping noise. Drip, drip, drip. It was comforting in an odd way, so I focused on it. It was a bit like counting sheep to fall asleep. Drip, drip, drip. As I did, I noticed that the dripping wasn't all that distant, but that it was, in fact, a lot closer to me. It came from under me. Drip, drip. No, this was just too strange. Whatever could it be? Was it tea? I didn't spill any tea. I drank all of mine. For some reason, my mind drew a blank again, and I smiled. Or rather, I would have if I could. Wait a second. That didn't make sense. Why couldn't I? Sweat ran down my face as I tried to open my eyes. Sweat? Ah, I see. That is a lot of sweat. I would border on thinking that I'm melting. Only then did I realize that the source of the dripping was me. It should have been a shock, but it's just as I understood that. It was too late to feel anything. Before long, there was nothing left of me anymore. Wait, I dripped into a puddle? Did I just die? I think I just died. Okay, moral of the story. Always go for the tea. Okay, so we're back, and now we're going to fix our mistake and we're going on a quest for the tea.
Well, all right then. I guess I don't really have a choice.
I took the teacup that was still full and downed the lukewarm tea. It wasn't really great, but it's not like I was expecting it to be. My, how boorish.
Let's see. How about I give you an actual reason to complain?
How do you plan to do that? I pushed my chair back with my feet and got up. As my feet made proper contact with the surface beneath them, I noticed how wet it was. They had been touching the odd floor before, yet strangely enough, I hadn't really paid mind to the water flooding it. Although it didn't go all the way up to the top of my toes, it was still a significant amount of water. Was I walking on top of water? Squinting, I peered into the liquid surface beneath my feet. I didn't see anything beside water, not even something that looked solid.
How odd.
There appeared to be some kind of tall grass around the table, but I simply couldn't wrap my mind around how it would grow without any earth beneath it. I tried forcing one foot in deeper, but it seemed impossible. That probably meant that it was stable, hopefully. Suddenly, a realization hit me. What if this was the water that automatically filled up Miss Teapot? I made a face. The last thing I, or anyone else for that matter, would want in their tea was water that had been contaminated by someone's feet. Shifting my attention back to the teapot, I walked over to her side of the table and stared down at her.
I'm going to take you with me.
What? You can't do that!
I'm a teapot, not an adventurer. I hardly see the problem here. It's going to work out nicely for the both of us. This way, I won't be the only one that will get hurt if anything happens inside the fog.
How will it work out nicely for me? If you get yourself killed, I won't be able to come back here by myself.
Well, next time I forget about things, you'll be able to brag to me about how brave you are. I might even praise you, having forgotten how much of an unlikable person you are.
I don't want to go. It is my duty to be here. Suppressing my smile with great effort, I tried to sound as sarcastic as possible, yet the mirth was audible in my voice.
Wow, isn't that just too bad? That's so sad. My heart goes out to you, really.
Oh, you awful brat! You'd better wash your hands. I'll spill hot water all over them.
I might just leave you somewhere over there if you do that, or even shatter you on the floor. How would you like that?
Did we just... Technically, I think we may have just threatened to kill them. Guest won't be pleased with that.
Yes, but that doesn't matter if I'm dead, right?
I grinned as I carefully picked up the teapot, supporting the bottom with one hand and holding the handle with the other. Turning around, I came face to face with the dark fog. It squished and squirmed just as rapidly as it had done before. As I took a deep breath, I was about to step in. I stopped. I had wanted to move. I really had, but my legs refused to cooperate. The moment I had turned around and faced the disgusting fog, they had locked in place.
You're not going? That's lovely. We can both stay here then.
I frowned at the teapot in my hands, forced a broad, cocky smile, and flashed it at her. Once again, I took a deep breath before forcing my left leg into the darkness. If anything motivated me, it was the will to get her to act unlike herself. Or at least, that's what I was trying to convince myself in my mind, to distract from the potential death sentence that this decision was. My right leg quickly followed, and before long, I was out of the light and into the darkness. For a while, I just stood there. I was on the same kind of surface as I was at the table. Strangely enough, there was no vegetation beneath my feet. There was a bit of grassy scent in the air, which was quite relieving, as I had expected the fog to reek of either chemicals or death. It wasn't like I thought it'd be, though the air was filled with more moisture than the area that was in the spotlight. It wasn't that hostile. But that didn't mean I could just let my guard down. Maybe it would reveal its hostility later. Just as I thought that, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and as they did, I saw floating lights that I hadn't seen while sitting in the brightly lit table. For a while, I admired the sight of the stars dancing freely inside the mist. Maybe they caused it to move in such a peculiar manner. I briefly wondered whether I could eat these too. But that's not what I was here for.
See, it's not that bad, you spineless coward. You're right. Put me back then. No, I don't know if it will get worse yet.
Fine, then just get this over with. I nodded and cautiously advanced forwards. Although it was a bit aimless, but I felt like I was relying on instincts in a place would probably work better than thinking about it. I get the feeling we'll be roaming through this darkness for a long time. Since Miss Teapot is with me, I guess we can talk. Okay, what should we talk about? How about the fog?
What do you think this fog is made of?
Who knows?
Obviously, you don't. Can you just play along for once and speculate with me?
As I spoke, traversing through the seemingly never-ending darkness, I tried following individual stars with my eyes, but every time I focused on a single one, it was quick to leave my field of vision. Though they shine brightly inside the darkness, they either didn't want attention or were messing with me. Even if they were at least very pretty.
I feel a bit silly now, being here and seeing this place. To think I was so scared of such a beautiful place.
Yes, I do agree that you were being very silly.
In fact, you're still being ridiculously silly, taking me with you and all.
Ignoring the snide remark, I returned to the topic at hand.
This fog feels kind of warm. It's weird.
How is it weird?
Well, usually fog forms when there's a big difference between the surface and the air temperature, right?
You tell me.
Well, okay, I guess you don't know. What's weird is that both the surface and the fog are warm. Frankly, I think this coloration is more peculiar.
Finally, Miss Teapot was contributing to the conversation. How? Might as well have frozen over.
That's true. When I saw the water around the table, it was clear and mainly reflected the colours of the light above. I didn't have this weird purple glow at all.
Don't sound so happy all of a sudden. It's disgusting. Your voice sounds better when you aren't.
I'm sorry.
Hal had clearly not frozen over and wouldn't freeze over anytime soon.
How long will it take us to get to the tea?
Depends on how quickly your dainty legs are.
Obviously, you didn't really answer my question.
You don't deserve it after kidnapping me.
Just admit that you don't know the answer.
It struck me that I didn't actually know how big the space was. I could end up walking aimlessly for days. Was this space going to be as big as the warehouse, a country, or the whole Earth? What if it was infinite and never-ending? A space even bigger and massive than even our universe. Even thinking about it made me dizzy. Without really thinking about it, my grip on Miss Teapot tightened and I froze in place. Hey, don't squeeze so hard. That's quite unnecessary. We're not getting anywhere if you're just going to stand here like a fool.
Ah, I'm sorry.
Despite how unpleasant she was, the fierce yet breezy voice snapped me out of my toxic train of thoughts. I loosened my fingers' grip and took a deep breath. All would be fine. Probably. I didn't need to think about things that were unnecessary. My mind tended to wander off into thinking grim thoughts, and this was just another case of that happening.
Is there anything I should keep an eye out for?
Tea. I should have expected any other answer, huh? Okay, so the last topic. Miss Teapot's water.
Do you refill automatically?
Maybe. Why are you asking?
Answer me and then I'll tell you. I don't want to know the answer that badly.
I sighed. Why did she have to be so difficult? That meant I just had to figure it out myself. Miss Teapot's steam supply seemed never ending. so I could safely presume that she was being magically refilled or producing the water herself. A teapot of her size should have been empty by now. Plus, it wasn't just the supply of water. The heat must be regulated by some kind of magic as well. You think too much. You will get wrinkles early if you keep that up. Would she stay alive if I poured out all the water? Would it hurt her? Surely not, since she was meant to serve tea. But then again, females of most species are meant to give birth, and that was something that's biologically normal, yet was said to be painful.
Hey, what would happen if I poured the water inside of you out all at once?
That's simply not possible.
Ah, I see. So it is a limitless supply? That's good.
It meant that if necessary, I could use Miss Teapot as a weapon. Or it means that I can cut off the supply at any time I see fit to do so. In other words, I'll need to throw both her and the potential danger off. If something bad happens, I need to act swiftly. If that doesn't work, I'll have to chuck her at the threat and run. I didn't know for how long I had been walking, but it felt like I had been hours. Maybe it was just me being an impatient person, but everything was starting to feel incredibly pointless. Was I even going to find anything? Did it matter whether I acquired any tea? What was the point of getting tea for a guest who might never even come? Why did I have to be the one to get it? I probably wouldn't find tea out here either. It was dumb to think I would. Right as that thought crossed my mind, I saw it. I could have easily missed it if I hadn't happened to gaze over at it by chance. There in the distance was a paper bag being held up by something dark. As I came closer, I saw something that resembled an adult hand holding a paper bag filled with tea leaves. But I couldn't feel any joy about having finally found what I was looking for. That hand didn't look natural at all. It looked like it was made out of a mass of small black beads. The beads moved and squirmed like maggots, making a disgusting wet sound as they moved. And like maggots, they would occasionally pulse as well. What the hell was that? The hand appeared to be hovering in the air due to the dense fog. The hand itself stayed still. It would have looked like a statue if not for the squirming and pulsing beads that formed it. All I knew was that I didn't want to get any closer to it. What are you waiting for, dear? That's the tea. The teapot called me dear again, as if she was trying to comfort me. She probably wasn't, though. I hadn't even noticed how hard my hands were gripping the teapot's warm porcelain surface. The knuckles on my left hand had turned white, and I had accidentally tilted my hold on her. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing, but the disgusting sound of the bees produced made it impossible to calm down. Arguably, only hearing it squirm made things worse. Come on, you're just about done. You just need to take the tea. We can head back as soon as you get it. I peeked behind me, but I didn't see the tea table's light at all. Getting back was going to take me forever. If it attacked, I could only rely on Miss Teapot. All you need to do is just follow your instincts again, and we'll get back there. All right, I understand. Slowly, I walked up to the hand. I couldn't see a body attached to it. It looked like it had manifested within in the mist itself. I looked over at the paper pack of tea and tried to focus on the tea inside it instead of the hand. Ah, Darjeeling. That's delicious.
Thank you very much for the wonderful tea.
Trying to make conversation with the entity that might be a bad idea, but being polite never hurt anyone. Or maybe it did, but was left unreported. The owner of the hand didn't reply as I stopped supporting the bottom of Miss Teapot and reached out to the surprisingly dry tea package. Trying to keep my focus on having a stable grip of her with my left hand, I avoided staring too much at the pulsing beady hand. Hastily yanking the tea out of the hand's grip, the beads offered little resistance as I politely bowed my head. That's a good thing. Always be polite to the strange entities. It could save your life, you know. The hand hovered in the air for a little while longer as I took my distance, taking a few steps back. Please wave goodbye. I would love you to wave goodbye at me. The beads that had held the hand fell apart and sublimed into the dense fog before they even hit the floor. Okay, well, it fell apart. I suppose that's as good as a waving goodbye. As it fell apart, I thought I saw some kind of tendrils in between the beads, for with them that had probably kept the beads together. Though it had spooked me a little, the beads luckily hadn't attempted to grab or crawl onto me.
So, I guess they were part of the fog? I mean, they disappeared into the fog before they could fall into the water. If so, why did they just manifest sooner?
Perhaps they wanted you to work for it.
Maybe. Who knows?
Turn around.
Did you say something?
No.
Have you gone daft, child?
It wasn't that scary.
What kind of coward are you? Wow, you went right back to being your usual caustic self, huh?
Turn around. You need to turn around. There it was again, an intrusive thought that couldn't have been part of my own. I couldn't even compare it to the weird thoughts that would pop up during potentially dangerous situations. Like when you hold a knife in your hand and think, I could actually stab myself or someone else right now. I wouldn't, but I could. Or like when you stand at the top of a high structure or cliff and think, I could jump right now and I would die. Just like that. Thoughts like that are probably our survival instincts hinting at the most awful outcome of a situation so that we could recoil and avoid letting things come to that. However, this thought wasn't that kind of intrusive thought. It wasn't the voice of my internal monologue, nor was it my survival instinct. Though I heard the words as if they had come from my own mind, I knew they weren't mine. For some reason, I felt that it was the hand's owner. It was like the being was calling out to me. Not with its voice, but rather by planting its will directly inside my head. Shivers ran down my spine as cold sweat rolled down my forehead. I hadn't noticed how unsteady my breathing had gotten. My hands instantly turned clammy. Keeping my grip on Miss Teapot steady was getting harder. I anxiously bit my lip as I tightened my grip onto her handle and the bag of tea in my other hand. As I took a deep breath, I gathered the courage I needed to force myself to turn around. Everything I had been afraid of up till now had turned out to be fine. So this, too, should be fine. Right? And so, against my better judgment, I turned around. Only to find out that this was the end of the demo. Dun dun dun. I hope you enjoyed that playthrough of Photopsia, the demo. I still think we should have potentially just, dropped the teacup a little bit. Just a little bit. Just give it a little chip there and then. As always, if you want to check out the game, I'll leave the link in the description below. If you enjoyed your time here, then please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel. Other than that, have a spooky day and I'll catch you next time, guys.